Every picture tells a story, learning to look at maritime art. And without further ado, Lyles Forbes.
Well, welcome everyone. So we're going to spend the next little bit of time this afternoon giving you an overview, not only about how to look at maritime art, but what to look for in maritime art, and give you sort of a brief history of the genre of maritime art. So why don't we dig in? Let's dig in. There we go. Now, so this is basically, in a small nutshell, the history of the history of marine art. It really doesn't begin until the Spanish Armada, and after 1588, royalty start requesting images of the defeat of the Spanish. You'll see a few things marked along here. Those are images or artists that are within the Mariners Museum collection. So our earliest painting is a portrait of Magellan, 1571. And then our next oldest is not long after the Battle of the Spanish Armada in 1645, which is a Dutch whaling scene. The Dutch are really the beginning painters, and we'll discuss a little bit of them as we move through, but they really began the genre of maritime art. And it was really mainly around battle scenes, because the British and the Dutch, and the British and the French, and the British and the Spanish, and the Spanish and the Dutch, and the Dutch and the French were all fighting, and so there was always some subject matter for them to capture. A father and son, the Van de Veldes, were probably the most prominent Dutch painters of the time, and their skill and their practice influenced people down through the ages. The next school was sort of the French and British. You see the time of Charles II, the beginning of the British school with painters like Peter Monamy, John Cleveley, two images in our collection. And then the British school with Robert Salmon and Miles Walters and Samuel Walters, the Yorks and all of that took off in the 19th century. And they based a lot of what they saw and what they painted sort of from the Dutch antecedents, but then it was always commercially driven, right? So if we go back to the Battle of the Spanish Armada, there were royalty who were engaging artists to create and recreate these scenes so that they could put them in their drawing rooms or in palaces or whatever. And so maritime art, unlike art that you see in, say, the Met or some of the large art museums where it's more expressionistic or abstract or this sort of thing, was very, very much commercial. It was always client-driven. And so that sort of shaped everything. And so that we really see that come out in the British school. And so we're going to spend a lot of time today looking at what's called the Liverpool School of Marine Painting. And that's where a lot of the genre really coalesced, and it really influenced everything that followed, which was primarily American painting, and then also photography. And photography gets started, really, it's invented in 1839. And you see Gustave Le Gray in 1856 produces the first maritime photograph. It's called Brig Upon the Sea. So the reason why throughout the 19th century and early into the 20th century that there's still paintings of maritime events versus photographs is that there are a lot of technical difficulties with photographing a ship in motion. If you know anything about daguerreotypes and tintypes, sometimes sitting in the studio, you'd be posing like this for 15, 20 minutes while the picture exposes. There's also this whole process of putting the silver gelatin on the plate. You've got a few seconds to get it into the camera, expose it, and then process it. A lot of dangerous chemicals. And so it just really wasn't a feasible form for quite a long time. We'll touch back on photography at a couple of points throughout the presentation, but I just wanted to show you this one photograph. And you can tell, not very much, you can barely tell that it's a brig, and most people probably wouldn't know it's a brig unless he had included that in the title, but he's taking it from quite a ways away, and that cuts down on the amount of movement that the ship's going to go through while he's exposing it. All right, so there are several thematic areas that you can break maritime painting into. The first is portraits. And when you say portraits, most people think of human portraits. This is the 1571 image of Magellan on the left, and in the center is John Franklin, an explorer in the 19th century, and then Admiral Lord Nelson, painted by Guzzardi in 1799. But for us, the Mariners Museum, it's really about ship portraiture. This is a standard ship portrait. One of the things that we hear a lot about, we have 1,300 paintings in the collection, and sometimes we get people in and we have a paintings exhibit, or we showing people through our paintings collection upstairs. It's like, well, you know, you've seen one, you've seen them all. And so that's kind of what I'm going to be here to kind of push back on a little bit today, that you really, each one has its own separate story, and it's the details and the construction and the composition of these things. It's really fascinating. There's a lot of stuff that you wouldn't see unless you stop for a minute and you look into the details of the backgrounds and some of that. This is a painting in 1885 of a Danish ship entering a U.S. port by Antonio Jacobsen. The next area are narratives, and narratives, and so there's no real hard line. A portrait can be a narrative can be a portrait. This is sort of just a generalization, if you will, to kind of categorize areas. There is a difference between some narrative paintings and the Jacobsen we just saw. There's not really a narrative there to be told. There's a story there, but it's a little bit different, and I'll show you how. This is a painting by Vernet in the 1780s. It's called Storm Along the French Coast. And we don't know where it is along the French coast. It really is not the point of the picture. The ships are actually almost irrelevant in the picture. It's a maritime scene only in the sense that there's water involved. Vernet and others in the late 18th century were employed to paint allegorical pictures that would then be displayed in the poorhouses and the debtors' prisons so that people could be taught the wages of sin. So you see over here, you've got one ship pointing out to sea. You've got the remnants of one that's wrecked on shore and one that's about to be wrecked on shore. And so there's a lot of sort of sermons that can be preached along this with people on the shoreline and the shading of the clouds and the light and everything like this. And they were meant to be allegorical stories rather than depictions of actual shipwrecks. And so you could point out, you know, are you the ship that's headed back out to sea to safety, or are you going to crunch along the rocky shoreline? So the next is a painting by Francis Holman, who was a British artist, in 1777. And who sees one ship in the painting? Okay, who sees two ships in the painting? Forget the ones in the background. Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, forget the ones in the background. Who sees two ships? Okay, who sees one ship? Bang. Okay, so this is a narrative by Francis Holman, and this is one ship. This is the Aston Hall, and the ship is working its way up the Thames River. And what he's done is to encapsulate a period of time between the ship here on starboard tack on the right-hand side and then the sails have been maneuvered around. She's tacked and is heading off on the new tack with on port tack. And so this was a convention that a lot of painters used to condense a piece of time into a single painting. It's compositional, but it's also meant to tell a story. This is the Aston Hall, and then you see this mooring buoy here. Unfortunately, you can't really tell there, but he signed and dated the top of the mooring buoy, Francis Holman, 1777. This is a little bit later. This is 1871. This is a race off Castle Garden in New York City between Magic and Gracie, and the story here is a yacht race. This is by James Buttersworth, and you can see the two protagonists here, but then you can see that they've these other yachts that are behind here. And so the idea is that you can see what went on in the past, that the two yachts, that Magic and Gracie, that are right here, that are identified by their burgees at the top of the mainmast, have come from this direction, and they were on this tack, and they've tacked around, and they're heading this way. So again, it's an encapsulation of time. It's a portrait. It's a real regatta that took place in 1871, and this is an odd-shaped little painting. It's about like this and about like that, and we believe that rather than being displayed in a home or a museum, that it was probably painted, commissioned of Buttersworth, to then hang on either Magic or Gracie. So the next is Seascapes. Seascapes really came into vogue in the late 19th century. A lot of people, especially in the United States, would go to New England in the summer and along the coastline, and they would learn to look at the waves and look at the sunlight and the clouds, learn how to capture light and color and the shapes of waves and all of this. And this is a spectacular painting by William Trost Richards of the coast of Cornwall in England, southwest England. And you can see the light through the waves, the wave actually hitting the rocky coast of Cornwall. And if you look really closely, you can see some of the seabirds up there on the top right. But it was all about realism. And the thing is, there's no ships present. There's no men present, no humans. It's just about capturing the light and everything about the seashore. This is another one. This is by William Bradford. This is a picture of a fishing station up in Canada. St. Michael's. I'll get it in a second. It'll pop into my mind. It's the one thing I didn't write down about this. It's a place called St. Michael. It's in Labrador. There we go. Okay, near a whaling station. What do you see over here in the right? Iceberg. Yeah, huge iceberg. And it was all about really getting the colors right. And so does anybody know the only color that you can see when you're looking at ice? It's the only color that's reflected. Blue, absolutely. And so he goes up there. He's an artist trained in the United States. He goes up, spends time at whaling stations and fishing stations solely to learn, how to depict icebergs and how to, what are the colors there, sunset and all of this. And so this is just a innocuous sort of whaling fishing village. But it's really about the iceberg. So remember this iceberg, because I'm going to ask you a question later on when something else comes up. There is a test, by the way. This is by an unidentified Chinese artist in 1855. And this is what's called the Foreign Factories in Canton. This is upriver from Hong Kong. So if you come into Hong Kong, you would stop there and then work your way up the Boca Tigris and then up the Whampoa River. Whampoa up the river to Canton. There's a quarter-mile stretch along the edge of the river where foreign companies had their factories. And so all of the goods that were being brought from the interior of China for foreign trade were brought here. The deals were made in the houses and the buildings back here in the factories, and then they were loaded back onto ships that would take them to Whampoa, and they would be loaded onto the American and British ships for oceanic travel. And so you can see the national flags here. There's Switzerland, America, France, Britain, and Denmark. And so those change over time, and you can look at those flags, and you can date the painting by the different countries represented there. But a lot of Chinese vessels, different sizes. You see rowing skiffs that are probably people from New England or Great Britain out here on the water. An American sidewheel steamer that would go up river, and they would bring back goods from the interior of China there. So why would someone paint this for an American audience? Well, let's say that we have a business factory. We are like the Augustine Herd Company in Boston and in Canton. A lot of times you wouldn't know, you would never go to Canton. In the early 19th century, your ships would go there and trade. You would get a picture, photograph. This is a huge painting, by the way. It's probably 4 or 5 feet long, good size view of Canton, very, very detailed. But you would commission this. They would bring it back so that you could see the port where you were traded. That's why a lot of maritime museums have a lot of different port views, because the ship owners and captains either wanted a souvenir or they wanted some depiction of the places where they were doing business. This is that case in point. The next is a little bit closer to home. This is an 1850 image of Gloucester, Massachusetts. This is the back end of Gloucester. If you know anything about the town, we were looking at this right now. Most of what you would see on the right would be gone and replaced by the Gorton's fishery. So the Gorton's fishermen, the fish sticks there. The company is right there on the right. But a bunch of fishing vessels at the beginning of the day in Gloucester. They're chopping up fish for bait, and then the depiction of the net drying there on the little pinky. This is by Fitzhenry Lane, who lived in Gloucester, not too far along there off to the right. Does anybody know where this is? Shipyard, yeah. So this is by Thomas Skinner, who was employed both by the shipyard in the 1930s through the 1950s and also at the museum. This is a large painting that we have in the collection, but he painted it around 1935, but the scene is actually from 1906. It was taken by someone flying an airplane, and it was an aerial photograph, and he just repainted it looking at the photograph. And what you see are 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7-masted schooners. So you know, with a 3-masted schooner, you've got the foremast, the mainmast, and the mizzen. Does anybody know what you have, what you call the main, with the mast on a 7-masted schooner? Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So, yep. So the Thomas Lawson, which is the 7-masted schooner, the Black Hull there, I believe, was well known, and that was the name of her mast. Okay, so eyewitness accounts. Now, like that last one was an eyewitness account by the person who took the photograph. Skinner probably never saw the wooden sailing ships in the dry dock there, but he had the photograph. And this goes all the way back to the Dutch, back to the Van de Veldes, who sort of began maritime painting in battles like this. Now, the father and son, Van de Velde, they, they would know where the battles were going to take place. The navies are assembling. And these two guys, throughout their history, would get in their skiffs and be rowed out into the battle where they would do their sketching as the battle's going on. And so, yeah, they were crazy. Then they would come back, they would paint, and they would proffer these to people of wealth and royalty, and they may make 10, 12, 13, 14 different copies of this same event, depending on if their clients were, in this case, the British who won. They would go there first and offer their services. If the Dutch happened to win this battle, then that would be their clients. And so, but there are a lot of sketches that they would do, lots of different types of, they would either do oil paintings or they would do pen and inks and this sort of thing. But there's actually images that they sketched of themselves out in these little skiffs being rowed around sketching. And can you imagine the guy that was paid to be the dude on the oars rowing them around like, have you got it yet? Have you got it? Let's get out of the way here. No. And certainly putting yourself in the line of the cannon on the lower decks, you hope you got paid well for it. Okay, so this is another interesting painting in the museum's collection, and this one is actually down to, what telling you dates of some of these when they're painted. This is actually depicting a date, 9th of February, 1838. Sorry, my glasses are up here. Yes, 1838. This is Astrolabe, a French ship that's trapped in the ice in Antarctica. And so these guys here are with the crew are trying to create a lead through the ice, because as you can see, the wind is blowing in this direction and it's forcing the ship up against the Antarctic continent there. And so they're out there feverishly trying to crack a lead in there so that the two flat pieces of ice can separate, and then the ship can actually get moving again. And the other ship in the voyage there is in the background. We didn't know for a long time the correct identity of this painting, and it was in our records as something else, and happened to run across a print of this painting that was in a library in Australia I guess we found it about 17, 18 years ago. Had the artist's name, had the date, had everything that was going on, and we actually had the original painting. So what about this tells you that it might not be an actual eyewitness account? Icebergs. Yeah. So these over here look more like something that you might see at Disney World, or something like that the artist might not have really seen the ice himself. Now, a lot of these voyages, because this is the first time Europeans had ever set foot, this is the first time that anybody had set foot that we know of on the Antarctic continent, 1838. This is Dumont d'Urville, a French admiral. And a lot of these exploration voyages took artists on board because there were no cameras, there were no other types of depiction, and they wanted to bring back images of everything that they were seeing in the Pacific, which was all brand new to people in Germany, France, Britain, and elsewhere. But we don't know if Augustus Meyer was actually on board, or if when they got to Australia or back to Europe and they were telling him, I want a picture of this, and describing it if that's the case. Oops. Okay, so this is probably maybe not an actual eyewitness account, but one of the more famous scenes that everybody wanted a copy of in Britain, especially royalty, people of wealth, everything. This is the moment that the French ship L'Orient exploded In the Battle of the Nile in 1789, one of Nelson's famous battles, and you can see all of these sailors, British sailors, up in the rigging, cheering, waving their hats, excited that the French ship has now exploded and victory is sealed. And so after the battle, the accounts of the battle were then shared and artists employed. And so this is by Robert Cleveley. It's in the collection. We have no idea how many views of this that he painted for clients, but there are a lot of Battle of Nile paintings out there, most of which focus on the moment that the Lorient exploded in the background. It had been fired into so many times that the magazine where all the powder and everything is stored on the lowest deck ignited, and that was it. And they said the masts went up like rockets. The battle stopped for about 10 minutes because it was the loudest thing that they had ever heard at that time. And Abu Qir Bay is where it happened, which is maybe 10 miles from Alexandria. That they could hear the explosion as far away as Alexandria. So a lot of powder and explosives on the lower deck. Okay, so this is the yacht Mayflower in 1886 as it's crossing the line to win the America's Cup in 1886. And you can see all the spectator vessels out there. William Halsell was probably present and painted this, capturing the moment that the cup had been successfully defended. And then you have something that's a little bit more intimate, not this grand array of vessels, but a more close-in kind of thing as they're loading the nets out of a boat onto a horse-drawn cart. This is a little bit more close in. You don't know the identity of any of the people standing around, but it captures part of the shoreside aspect of maritime painting. And then you have expressionism, which is a little bit more modern, brings it up into the 20th century. This is a depiction of the Monitor in Rhode Island, the night that Monitor sank at sea. This is inspired by the Beatles' Revolution #9, the Paisley Smoke. The only thing missing, I think, from this are the Blue Meanies and Ringo Starr. This was done in 1979. It's meant to be less realistic and more expressionistic. This is, you remember the Fitzhenry Lane painting of Gloucester. This is another view of Gloucester. And I've always thought that this one was 1980s, 1990s, something like that. This is actually 1920s by a female artist. And it's more like what you would expect, sort of the bright pastel colors, not a lot of detail, meant to be viewed from a little bit of a distance. The artist's name is Jane Peterson. And this is of a boat that's actually in our collection, and one that we've been studying, actually working on the boat, trying to understand the construction and function and everything of this boat from Portugal recently. And this is a painting by José Maria Lopez Mesquita, and around 1933, 1934, of that particular boat on the lagoon in Aveiro, Portugal. And we're trying to use what we see here in the painting to help us understand more about some of the construction, some of the details that are present in the boat. Problem is, because it's more expressionistic and less detailed, we're like, we can see oars, we can see a guy sculling sort of like you would on a gondola, but there's not enough there for us to kind of go on. But it does give you an idea of the place and how the boat was used and the type of water and the marine environment and everything that it's in. So that actually brings us to the Liverpool School of Paintings. Now, Liverpool is important because this is where a lot of marine painting came of age, and it influenced a lot of painting in the United States. Liverpool is on the west coast of England, a couple hundred miles from London, and just off the Irish Sea. Now, we'll see some other maps, but this is basically the town of Liverpool here, Birkenhead, Walsley, and then the Mersey River is the river that Liverpool is located on. And so we're going to spend some time looking at details in and around Liverpool, because details really matter. And these paintings, they are commissioned a lot of times by American ship owners and ship captains. And so I want you to get familiar with that. This is a later map, probably around 1900, 1920 of Liverpool. This is the mouth of the River Mersey right here. Ships would come in this way, and you see this massive dock system that runs for several miles along the Liverpool waterfront. We're going to look at some of that as well, because this is a critical element in the Liverpool School of Paintings. It's also a way to compare. With the Mariners Museum, we say we're connected to one another by the world's waters. And you can look at the shape of the Liverpool waterfront and all of the activity. And when you're down around Hampton Roads and Norfolk and Newport News, there's a lot of the same kind of things present as well. So why Liverpool? Well, Liverpool and America are really well connected, especially in the 19th century. It was a massive port. A lot of raw materials were being brought out of the United States to Liverpool. They were taken inland and then manufactured and then brought back to Liverpool and sold around the world. So it really is about the Mersey, it's about the docks, and all them ships from America. Plus it's groovy and fab. Ringo never gets the credit he's due. So this is an interesting little chart. This is from the 50s, but it really shows you still in the 1950s the mercantile and the trade and the industry around Liverpool, including the railways. There's shipbuilding, there's ship repair, there's grain docks, there's banana docks, there's seed crushing, there's all sorts of things. And we're going to see along the Liverpool docks, there was, if you were coming from South Carolina or you were coming from Virginia and your ship was full of tobacco, you went to the tobacco docks. Okay, if you were coming from New Orleans and you had cotton, there were cotton docks, and so that's where your ship was taken and docked. It was a very sophisticated system, even in the 19th century. So this is the River Mersey today. We're going to take a look in depth here in a few minutes at this complex over here, these buildings called the Albert Docks, but this is looking out towards the north, towards the mouth of the Mersey River. Yes. Yes, we'll touch on that momentarily. Absolutely. So, starting over at the Albert Docks over here in the bottom right, this is looking up the Mersey River as well, and 4 lads running along there. Hey, forget them. But we're going to look over here in the skyline. You can see a little knob right up in there, a place called Bidston Hill. We'll look at that in a second. Very, very important. So this is a close-up of the Liverpool docks. You see over here in the bottom right, tobacco docks. And these are hogsheads of tobacco in the early 20th century being unloaded off of ships into the tobacco docks, and then would be put on the trains for London, Manchester, and other places in Britain for consumption. This is the Albert docks. This is the interior part. This is where all the ships would be brought to be offloaded here at the Albert docks. And now you see a lot of yachts and that sort of thing docked in there. This is Canning Wharf half dock. Now, when you came in from the Mersey River, which is here, you would come in here. You see it's not very wide, but one ship at a time would come in here. And this is from the other side, so we've walked across, and now we're looking back at this building here. It would open up, those bridges would lift or turn, and then the ships would be brought in to the half-tide dock there, and then moved either into the Albert docks. Now this is an area here, so we just looked at this little piece of land here. You come in, they would be either in the canning docks here. This ship is actually right here in this graving dock. There's another one behind it. You can see a more modern looking ship that's in this graving dock. It's basically a dry dock where they can actually get all the water out and do the repairs on the ships right there, put it back in the canning dock, and then go out. And then right here along Strand Street is a building with extant billboards saying the Great Western Railway. If you know anything about the Great Western Railway, Isambard Kingdom Brunel, who built the SS Great Britain and railways throughout Great Britain, also built railways into Liverpool. And so it was very, very important that the railways then take up all of the produce that's coming into the Albert Dock and the Salthouse Dock and King's Dock and moved it inland, got it to Herculaneum, Manchester, London, whatever. But they went on the rail lines of the Great Western Railway. And you can actually see right up here at the top, Lime Street Station, Exchange Station here, and Central Station there, all railways closely associated with the docks here. This arrow shows this view. These are the three graces. There's three buildings here. The one in the foreground is the Port of Liverpool building. The one without domes, sort of right here, is the Cunard building. Right here, this is the Port of Liverpool building. This is the Cunard building. And then the one in the background is just called the Royal Liver building. But it's some impressive architecture right there on the waterfront. And you'll notice right down here, this is called Prince's Landing Stage, Prince's Landing Wharf. And this is where all of the immigrants left for the United States. It's sort of like where you get on the cruise ships today. It's the public area as opposed to where the tobacco and the cotton and everything else was offloaded. This was specifically for passengers, and this is an engraving from the 19th century of passengers about ready to leave or about ready to board there at Prince's Landing. And numerous broadsides steam between New York and Liverpool. And it's the wages here for first-class cabins all the way down from steerage to Liverpool to Queensland and eventually New York. But the American ships that were calling in Liverpool were really at this point in time trying to set up and establish and maintain constant, regular scheduled travel service. They really felt like with steam and sail, they could, when the wind died, they could turn the boilers on and steam into port and still make their schedule arrivals, turn right around, and leave on a scheduled date and time. And that was really started the American supremacy of commercial traffic, especially for immigration and also just travel. It did call in Liverpool. Sorry? Sure. Did the Titanic ever leave from Liverpool? It did go to Liverpool, but most of the pictures you see of it are at the Queensland docks in Cork, Ireland. Now, Prince's landing stage is also where you pick up the ferry across the Mersey. Dave Clark 5. There you go. Yeah. So that's, yep, them too. So that's one of the additions of the, you won't miss that. You don't need a radar to see that one coming, even in the fog. So let's go back and take a look at the Albert Docks for a second. This is an aerial view. This building here now is the Tate Modern, which is also in London, art museum, and then this is the Maritime Museum here, Merseyside Maritime Museum. But you can see railroad tracks all the way across this little bridge. This would move, the ships would go in here. Here's a great view of it at the height, and you can see all of the ship traffic. You've got a ship here in the graving dock, one here, you've got one there, and look at all of them back in here, maneuvered through these tiny little passageways into these docks for offloading. Just a vibrant waterfront. Here's one of the cotton docks. Yes? They were towed by steam. Yeah. Now, yeah. Then there are implements, which I'll show you here. Now, you'll notice in the archways of each of these buildings, cranes. Some of these are for lifting. I think these are used for helping pull the ship close up to the dock where it can be loaded. There was no label text around that. It was just like, well, that's a cool crane kind of thing, but it doesn't swing out like the one on the left there does. That's the Maritime Museum, by the way. And then this is another one that runs on railroad tracks, lifts things, and can spin around, put it on something else. So, who was painting in Liverpool and why? So these are some of the prominent painters in Liverpool. Robert Salmon is one of the great painters. This guy could, everything from his backgrounds to his skies to his depictions of the ships were exquisite. A little bit stylistic with the water, but that wasn't his strength. His strength was really depictions of the ships. Now, a lot of these guys who are painting maritime works like Salmon and others had spent time at sea, and they knew the difference between running and standing rigging, right? So you've got two sets of rigging. Standing rigging is what holds the masts up. Running rigging is what you use to shift the sails around and raise them and lower them and all this sort of thing. And so people that are commissioning this knew what their ships looked like, wanted them presented in a way that showed them majestically at sea or in this type of positions. Does anybody know what this is actually called and why the sails look like this? Is this purposeful? Well, this ship is in what's called hove to. And this is a way that you have control of the ship by backing the sails here. You can see the wind is pushing against this, but it's also pushing in the opposite direction against the mizzen and foremast. And what that does is allows the ship to continue to move forward, but at a slower rate of speed, and you still have control over it in the tight confines of the river. And the reason that you would do that is because you've got a pilot boat that's come alongside here. Now they're either dropping off a pilot or picking up a pilot. Doesn't matter for this picture what they're doing. He really understood what a ship and hove to looked like, how the sails looked, how the yards were turned, and all of that. And so he was very well sought after, very much sought after, from 1800 to about 1823. Yes. There.
When you're in that configuration, the flag is trending aft, as is the pennant.
Right.
But you've got full sails coming from aft.
Okay, so this is a little bit of.
It seems counterintuitive.
It's a little bit, so forget it sailing for the moment. This is also about identifying the ship. And so it's an artistic convention to put the pilot flag there, the British ensign here at the bottom. And we'll see more of that with other flags when it gets more specific. But it's that part of it is, again, client driven. They want to be able to see the flags showing the name of the ship or whatever. Yeah, a little bit of poetic license. Yeah, to be expected. So here's one that the flags are flying kind of forward. It's with the wind, but it looks a little goofy. So how many ships do you see there? One, exactly. Very good. Yeah, excellent. So this is Ellen Brooks, the name of the ship, and headed into Liverpool. We know it's the Ellen Brooks because it says so here. It says so on the flag there. That's the company flag there, and the same flags are there, and it actually says Ellen Brooks on the stern. So no question that that's the Ellen Brooks. That's by Miles Walters. Yes, sir.
You're making me work.
You know, I can talk loud enough so I don't need this thing.
Yes. Just say it loud.
Don't kill yourself.
No, say it loud.
When was the convention changed from doing the one ship in two profiles to showing it packing?
It started in the first one that we know of is 1777, which is the Francis Holman of the Aston Hall. And again, it's client driven because we're going to look at one in a few minutes that's even different from any of these that we've seen. And there's a couple of different reasons for that, and I'll expound on that when we get to the last one. So this is a modern view of Liverpool. This is Prince's Landing Stage here that we've already seen. The Albert Dock is right down in here. This says Edward Street. This is where Miles Walters lived. Initially, the artist kind of moved around. It's close to the dock, so when ships came in, he could go down there and sketch. This is a advertisement that he put out. It just says Walters Marine Painter, Edward Street, Limehouse Fields. Real oil paintings on canvas, neatly finished, portraits of ships, taken by scale in a seaman-like manner in every situation, with gold frames complete, cheaper than any man in England. And then down below here it says, the artist in his youthful days worked in a mold loft and had been 13 years at sea and has painted upwards of 200 ships in the last 6 years and sent them to all corners of the world. So this is about 1830, and this guy is really out there selling himself and not selling himself short either. And so that was his advertisement. And this is his son, Samuel Walters. Both of them were maritime painters. And this is an example of his work. We're going to see some more of that in a few minutes. But he and his father, now, here's the Albert Docks. Here's the two graving docks. Here's the entrance there. And you can see Berry Street right up here, not far from either. It's about a 10-15 minute walk on a good day down to the Albert Docks. There it is, a little bit different perspective. That's what it looks like today. And then this is the building, or at least the address where Miles and his son lived and worked on Berry Street. Now, Liverpool was one of the most bombed places in World War II. A lot of people think it was London, but the industrial center of England was Liverpool, and the shipyards and the shipping docks and all that, the Germans spent a lot of time bombing it. So it's probably not the same building, but it is the same address. But there seem to be some pretty good food choices around there for a couple of high quality painters. This is a picture of Samuel Walters in front of one of his paintings. Now, he was the consummate businessman. All of the painters that we're going to see today, they were businessmen, but Samuel Walters was the top of the heap. A lot of these paintings, like I said, were produced for ship owners and ship captains, and they were expensive. $300 was a lot of money to pay. And he figured out how to use photography to create an image that was cheaper that the seaman could buy. So when he finished a painting, he'd take a photograph of it. He would mount the albumin photograph on a backboard. The one on this side is the city of Brooklyn, and this is the city of Boston. So the paintings would go to the captain or the ship owner or whatever, and then the ordinary seaman could pay $10, $15 or less and get a photograph of the same painting and carry it himself. So he's out there making money left and right. This is Duncan McFarlane, another very well-known painter in the 1850s. William York, later in the 19th century came to the fore, and then eventually his son took over, William H. York, and painted all the way up until the 1920s. So that's really the span of the Liverpool School. Now we're going to take a look at Atalanta and look at some of the details around this and why this painting is important for what it's displaying. Landmarks are very, very important. So one thing that we're going to see repeated over and over is Perchfort Rock and the New Brighton Lighthouse. Perchfort Rock is right here, and the lighthouse is right here. Whoops, went the wrong way. Yeah. The next is Bidston Hill. Now, Bidston Hill is located here on a promontory, and it's got this lighthouse there, kind of far inland. It's about 5 miles from downtown Liverpool. And all of these masts with all of these flags are up there. And so the lighthouse itself is a navigational piece, but then you've got all these flags up there, and we're going to get into this in just a second. So we have this jug in our collection, and it talks about the East View, the lighthouse at Bidston Hill, and the signals. And you see all of these names down here. Well, these flag posts alerted the ship owners in Liverpool as to when their ships were coming in. And if you look right here, you'll see it says Mr. Leyland. And we did some research, and Leyland is just the first one that came up. I could have picked a number, any one of these. But Leyland was 3 times the mayor of Liverpool. He had interest in over 72 slaving voyages. Now, the slave trade did not really come into Liverpool. The ships left. They would transport enslaved people to the Americas and then bring cargo back to Liverpool. He made a lot of money and went into banking, started Leyland Bank, and which is merged with banks over the years. It became Midland and is now known as HSBC, and died in 1827. So he had a flagpole, a signal pole up on Bidston Hill. If you look right here, this says London Cheese Ships. Evidently, Cheshire cheese was shipped from Liverpool to London on special ships. They had their own signal flags. We don't know if it's like the people from Wisconsin who wear the cheese heads. We are digging into that. Okay, so back to Atalanta. So on her mizzen mast, she has this flag back here that says EGC. Normally, you would see a flag for the owner, Theodore Chase and Company. But this is the personal flag of the ship's captain, Eldridge Colby. And then you see these four signal flags here. Now, on the mainmast, in the center there, it says Atalanta. There was a code flag system developed in Liverpool. One was called Elford's. The next one was called Watson's Holyhead to Liverpool flags, and then Captain Marriott's. And so these were published and readily available to captains and supercargoes and this sort of thing. And if we go back to Elford's telegraphic flags, we can determine the number, the ship's number, the registration number of the Atalanta, 2, 6, 3, and 5. Now don't get too hung up on the fact that Elford's is blue and white, and what we see painted here was red and white. It's really, it could be black and white. It's just a dark color versus the white color. And so you would look in the book, like a Lloyd's shipping register, 2635. That's the Atalanta out of Atlanta, per se. They also published books like this. This is much later because this has got steamship stacks, but all of these house flags so that you could flip through and find out and confirm that, yep, that's the Atalanta owned by Theodore Owen, whatever his name was, and then captained by Colby. All right, so we're going to take a voyage here with the Atalanta is coming up the Irish Sea, and as she comes in view of the Holyhead Telegraph and South Stack, she raises her flags, right? Her house flag, and then her four signal flags. Well, up on Holyhead, the operator is going to fly that. And this signal is going to be transferred all along the 70 miles of the Welsh coast as Atalanta continues to sail in. And on average, within 7 minutes of Atalanta raising her hoist the first time, the ship owners in Liverpool know, weather dependent, Atalanta is going to be coming into the Mersey River the next day. And lo and behold, there she is, coming into the head of the River Mersey. Here's Liverpool, here's New Brighton Light, and Perch Rock Fort. Okay? So, now, something a little different. I'm just going to run through and show you some backgrounds that are very, very important to Liverpool paintings. This is the ship Europa. This is a print from a Samuel Walters painting. This is, can anybody guess the name of the company that owns this ship? Blackball Line. Blackball Line and the Weld Line flag was a horse, and they're one of the few that you see where the shipping logo is kind of on the sail. Blackball and Weld Line. So here is Holyhead Mount on the right, and then South Stack. There's a little lighthouse there that you can see in the distance. Very, very famous at the northwest corner of Wales. And that's really the entrance into to Liverpool, and the first place that you can pick up a pilot to guide you in. All right, so there she is. The next one is, I included this just because of the name of the ship. It's the Shaka Maxon. How can you not? I ran across this, it's like, man, that is too cool. So Shaka Maxon is off of Holyhead and South Stack, a little farther along, but you can see her signal flags here. Now, this is one of the books, or a facsimile of one of the books, and you can see all of these ship names listed. And if you run down here, the 7305, there's the Shaka Maxon. Of course, they misspelled it. Shaka Maxu. So not quite as cool as Shakamatsin. But there it is. Now, a lot of these that you'll see, they have the ensign or the jack or a blue flag with a P on it. They're calling for a pilot boat. As early as Holyhead, and the pilot will see that and come out, and you actually see Holyhead and South Stack right here. Here comes pilot boat number 2. So again, the artist is telling a narrative. You see what's going to happen in the future because they're calling for a pilot. The pilot's on its way out. And actually, we don't know if the pilot's coming for this ship here or the steamship that's there, but it really doesn't matter. Either one is going to get a pilot there. That's where she is in relation to the view. This is the Princeton. It's also off of Holyhead and South Stack, which you see back here, but this is a place right here called the Skerries, and that's Skerries. It's a line of rocks out there with a lighthouse on it. Sker, S-K-E-R, is a Norwegian word for outcropping of rocks. Who knew? She's also calling for a pilot, and you can see that they're preparing to take the pilot on board because they've sent sailors up to the tops to begin shortening sail so that they can slow the ship down so that they can get a pilot aboard there. There's a better view of them. Red Star Line ship, and her numbers there on the mizzen. And there comes the pilot boat. All right. This is a painting by Samuel Walters. This is farther in, off of Paris Mountain and Point Linus. This is Paris Mountain over here, and this is Point Linus Light. And here comes pilot boat number 8 out. Now, this is looking at the stern of the vessel. Anybody see anything that's kind of interesting? Yeah, absolutely. There's a woman on board, right there. Now, this is inbound, so she's likely not immigrating, so it could be the captain's wife who, women often traveled with their husbands on board, or it could be just a passenger who is wanting to come to England. So this is where, this is Paris Mountain here, Point Linus Light there. Now, this is a really rare painting that's in our collection. It's unfortunately not framed. It's got some real conservation issues, but this is by Miles Walters in 1830, and it's of a pilot boat. And the pilot boat is at the mouth of the Mersey River, and it's just a fantastic, fantastic painting. That's New Brighton Light and Perchfort Rock over there, so we're looking kind of over towards Bidston Hill. But you'll notice that this guy here in the boat's just being towed along. And here at the bow, this guy is actually in the process of throwing a line over to these folks in this boat here. So how many pilot boats did you see in the picture? 1 or 2? 1. So this is how you see the 4 on the sail, and the 4 on the sail over here, and on the stern there, it's pilot boat. It says Happy Return, pilot boat number 4. So the name of the boat is Happy Return, and it's pilot boat number 4. And you see the same guy who's still just sitting there hanging out, enjoying the tow upriver. We didn't see what became of these guys here where they threw the rope to. What's the story there? Well, a scholar in England believes that they are just catching the ride upriver, because if you look at the position of the pilot boat over here and over here, it's really heeling a lot more over here. So right now in the right-hand view, they've headed up into the wind to slow down so that they can tow this guy along. And so this was a common thing. Fishermen and guys out here would just catch a ride upriver. It's called taking a pluck upriver, if you want to know for sure. And so they get towed upriver, but he didn't include it in the second view of the vessel there. But now the pilot boat has borne off the wind and is picking up speed. And so that's where that is, at the mouth of the Mersey River. And then over here you can see, this is a Robert Salmon painting, again in Hove 2 position. Now what's different about this is that this is not a commercial vessel. This is a British warship. And the commercial vessels often flew the same color red flag with the Union Jack ensign from the mizzen. This is actually a warship because she's got her gun ports open and the guns thrust through. Now you'll see a lot of American ships that have that same decoration, but there are no gun ports. They were there to give you kind of a warning that this could be, might not be. You don't want to find out too late if you're thinking about messing with it. Yeah, and so you can see a pilot boat there is alongside, and then the ship over here in the second position, now facing Bidston Hill, which is in the background here, and you can see some of the telegraph poles up there, and we believe that the ship is now about to come to anchor. But here's the pilots either coming aboard or getting off the ship. Bidston Hill in the distance, and then that's where she is in the river. Now, whoa. How many ships do you see depicted? Forget the stuff in the background. 3, 2, or 1? 3. Come on. Okay. Actually, yes, 3. But it's what's called a 3-ship composition. Now, sometimes you'll see artists do the same vessel in 3 positions. This one is that same composition. It's 3 vessels from the same company, okay? So the main one is called the Frank Pierce in the center. We're not quite sure, well, and we know it's Frank Pierce because there's its flag. We're not too sure about the name of the vessel here because we can't see the name there. It could be one of the other vessels. This was a company out of New Orleans. Now, look at the gun ports here. This is an American ship. Those are false gun ports, okay? There's no guns on board. This is the Victoria Tower. It's the entrance to Salisbury Dock, where the first is depicted. Frank Pierce there on the thing. Look at all the house flags in the background. You've got the black ball line here. You've got this red one with the diamond, which is Enoch Train out of Boston. A couple of Liverpool house flags there. And then down in the right front here, pilot boat number 6, okay? A lot of amazing detail. And look at how many masts and things are in the background and inside the docks as the Frank Pierce is coming in. Now, this is the ship that's on the right. And this is, you can see its flag up there. It's Peter Marcy. Both of the ships, Peter Marcy and Frank Pierce, were out of New Orleans. And then you can see a really cool thing here that's quite rare. You've got the Marriott code. Why would a ship in dock have its flags flying, its signal flags? It's the only one, and it's first pennant, and then the ship number 5208. Haven't had time to look that up to see if it's another one of the company that's out of New Orleans of these 3 ships. So here it is in its first position, the center position, and the third position as it moves from off of Salisbury Dock to entrance into the half-tide Albert Dock, about 1.5 miles. All of that is captured within that painting. It tells the story of how that ship is coming in, reducing sail, taking on a pilot, preparing to come in to the Albert Dock. Fantastic thing, whether or not it's 3 individual ships or it's meant to be telling the story of the Frank Pierce. But that's where that occurs, is right there in Liverpool on that part. So let's hit some final other Liverpool artists where they lived. and the landmarks that were
About to
captured
run out of time.
in their works. 2 seconds.
Okay.
All right, so there's the Albert Docks. Oh, there we go. Ringo lived there. That's where George lived. That's where John lived. That's where Paul lived. Liverpool artists, landmarks, Strawberry Fields, Penny Lane. The Beatles experience is right here on the Albert Docks, as a matter of fact. So, yeah, it's a fantastic museum. And then, of course, the Cavern Club there on Matthew Street in downtown Liverpool. So, I think that's it. Say goodnight, Ringo. Good night. Now we're done. Thank you very much.